I grew up in Richmond Heights, Ohio, which is a small suburb outside of Cleveland. And for me, it was kind of a dream to go to Case Western Reserve because I'd heard about it my entire life. It was really the recognized university of the city. And probably unlike most universities in most cities, it's a very special place with all the museums. And I don't know that there's another university, quite frankly, maybe in the world, that has all the cultural aspects that Case Western Reserve has on its campus. So for me, it was really a dream to have the opportunity to go there. And since I was working my way through with help from my parents, it was great to go to my hometown university, so to speak. I did have other universities for law school that I thought of. I had aspirations of going to Michigan. And quite frankly, that seems kind of odd for an Ohio boy wanting to go to Michigan. Or my whole life rooting for other universities other than Michigan, actually rooting against Michigan. But Case Western Reserve was a great choice for me. And in hindsight, I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to go there. Certainly, I have fond memories of being at law school and of the people there. It's like so many other things that in life, the people that you associate with and you come in contact with leave indelible marks on your past, your future, your present. And probably going to ramble a little bit here, but I'd say that you had asked me earlier about why I wanted to go to law school. And I think like so many young people when I was in my very formative years, my mother was clerk treasurer of a school system. My father had actually gone to Case Institute, taken some classes, but neither one of them ever graduated from college. Their families had immigrated from Germany and Poland. And I, like so many of the other people, was a war baby, post-war baby. But they really taught me about hard work. They were both very analytical and math oriented. And so when I got to undergraduate school, as you can imagine, not having a lot of family memories of people that went to school since I was first generation, it was an interesting exercise for me. But professors were a very big part of why I ended up doing what I did. I'm a tax guy. And there was a professor in undergraduate school that got that motivation going. I had an undergraduate focus on accounting, but really an interest in tax. And that's where melding my analytical skills with my math skills. I wasn't that great on the reading and writing and that side of the law school. So that's probably why I moved in that direction. And then, of course, when I got to Case Western Reserve Law School, which was the next step, in progression of developing my passion around accounting and law, and particularly tax. I was one of those folks that was, as you probably heard this from so many more people than me, Leon Gabinet, who I will put in the legend category, left his mark on me like he did on so many of the other law students at Case Western Reserve. And he really made my desire to go to tax evolve. Kevin McDonald, who is in the society, had sent me a note congratulating me that he had seen that I had been admitted to the society. And he was very influential with me in law school. We both played Little League baseball together. And his comment when he congratulated me was, "Charlie, isn't it great that there's two Little League baseball players from little Richmond Heights that are in the society? As you know, we can't have too many of those." But we had a professor, Adams, and I want to say he taught civil procedure. It was either con law. I think it was civil procedure, but it might have been con law. How quickly we forget, right? But he was the professor that was, they don't call it RAW anymore, Research Advocacy and Writing. It's got another name now, but he was the faculty advisor to my RAW group. And we'd had a little episode at the university where somebody left a nasty note for one of the other students for talking too much in class. And it was right at Thanksgiving, and Professor Adams had found out about this nasty note and was in the middle of a tirade not tyrant, that's the wrong word, but he was in the middle of, so to speak, scolding us and talking about ethics, and, in the future, we had to do better. And my raw group, being Thanksgiving, had planned something because we had grown fond of Professor Adams, to do something for Thanksgiving, and unknown to the person that got the charge to do this, which was a member of our raw group, they walked into the class in the middle of him talking to the class about being professionals, and handed him a string, and he didn't know what to do with it, but he started to pull on it, and in walked a turkey. And he lost it. And not in a bad way. He couldn't stop laughing, as I recall. And he just basically turned to the class and said, "Oh, you understand what I meant," and went back to teaching. The other one was Professor, I want to say Professor Haskell. And there was he might have been second in our class, a fellow by the name of Ed Potasek, who I believe went on to Baker Hostetler. And I think Professor Haskell, I think, was pretty fond of Ed. Ed answered a lot of questions in class, and I think he could do no wrong for Professor Haskell. But Professor Haskell wore pretty much a coat and tie every day to school to teach, and he wore these very interesting ties. And one day, Ed Potasek, unknown to I think anybody else in class, got up from his seat, walked down to the podium with the scissors, and cut Professor Haskell's tie off. Now, those might be two legendary things that happened while I was in law school. Have nothing really to do with law school, other than that, as hard as we worked and as difficult as it was, and those were in the days of the famous Harvard movie Paper Chase that scared the heck out of most of us going to school at the time when that just happened when we went. It was nice to have some lighter things that occurred in class. And I never really went to law school imagining that those kinds of things would ever happen. There's a lot of aspects, and whether or not, for me, getting an undergraduate accounting degree, I wanted to go to law school, but getting an undergraduate accounting degree allowed me the flexibility that I knew I could have a nice career in that profession with, at that time, one of the big eight. Was always the goal of somebody that was coming out of undergraduate school in accounting. That was typically a goal anyway. But that I had that to fall back on. But I always intended to go to law school. It's just that because of these professors, and they weren't spinning it. They both the professor in undergraduate school and Professor Gabinet had a lot of life experiences with clients. And I think that's what it was all about. I always believed that I was on the personal side as opposed to the corporate side of tax. So I did tax work for people as opposed to companies. And I got to know their families very well, was a trusted confidant of the families, got to know the children. And I think that's what it's about. I said earlier that the people you come in contact throughout your life leave indelible marks. And I wanted to be in a position with folks where I could truly help them with their lives, and to help them make decisions that were important in their lives. And believe it or not, the tax field is a pretty good place to do that on the personal side. I did a lot of work with major law firms in Cleveland because I was in Cleveland for many years, but with firms like Squire Sanders and Jones Day and Baker Hostetler, and the list goes on. We're blessed in Cleveland with a lot of very fine law firms. And I did a lot of work with the folks in the law firms, particularly on the estate planning side or the personal planning side. And what I learned was that my analytical skills and coming from the CPA side and that side of the tax law, I was better equipped to make analytical decisions, to put the words into dollars and cents as to what was the better decision for a family to do this or that. And so I worked very closely with those firms on a lot of very prominent families in the Cleveland area before I went out to Washington, D.C. and then on to Atlanta. And so that's what I would tell a young person. I think that, you talk to your professors is probably the first thing. that if they have life experiences of being in practice on their own, they will help to bring it to life for you, which they did for me. And if you have a desire to meld certain things that you may be better in, like analytics and math, tax is a wonderful place for that. And then if you, it seems odd to tell someone, yes, you're in tax law, you can help people. That maybe, doctors, there's a lot of other professions where you would think first and foremost, psychologists, psychiatrists, and so on. But I actually feel like I became part of the family with many of my clients. And I was oftentimes one of the first people they would call about any decision. And that was to me very, very rewarding. And probably the most rewarding part of my professional career was dealing with individuals and getting to know their families and helping them through life events. We've had a lot of wonderful people that have come through Case Western Reserve. All of them don't practice what people think of as tax. Many of them go on to be business people. They don't always practice law, or they may practice an element of law and become great business people. But to me, that is such a rewarding aspect of my association with Case Western Reserve, is getting to know so many people and bringing so many of those people into my world, where they could thrive and then possibly move on to even bigger and better things. So I was in the Cleveland practice for quite a few years. When I was a very young partner, I made partner pretty quick. And now it takes even longer, but in those days it was pretty quick for me. I was 32, I think, when I made partner. And shortly thereafter, they asked me if I would go to Washington because I had been involved in tax recruiting, and we hired about 700 people a year, so it wasn't a small thing. And many, many lawyers. We had almost 1,000 lawyers on our staff just in the US. And I went to Washington, where I ran part of the practice, more what we did for people. And I had the opportunity to do a number of things while I was there. I testified before Congress on some tax matters, some financial planning matters, actually. And I also had the opportunity, I'm not sure I should call this an opportunity, but I did advise on a number of occasions. I went to meet with the National Office of the IRS to advise, and I advised them about, if you recall, the Madoff debacle, Bernie Madoff. I advised the IRS on not that they necessarily listened to me, but I advised them on what I thought they needed to do so that they didn't have 100 different ways that people were handling the Madoff matter in the taxes. And so they came out with some rulings. So over the years, I got to do quite a few things while I was in Washington. And then when the Ernst firm, we had a number of mergers and became Ernst and Winnie, which was our British affiliate, was Winnie Murray. Then we merged with Arthur Young, and I was asked to go back to Cleveland to head up some things, which I did. I headed up the same practice back in Cleveland, which was a major office for us still at that time. And then a few years later, they came to me, they asked me to go to New York, which I turned down. Then they asked me if I would come south to Atlanta. I thought that, oh, that sounded great. My wife grew up in the New York area. She didn't want to go to New York, but I thought she loved coming south. She didn't like that either. So, but I ended up in the South heading up some things in what we call the regional area at that time, the southeastern United States. And maybe it's a little bit of the Peter principle, but I just kept getting promoted to other things to do. And ultimately, I was asked to take the role of the global director on a worldwide basis for Ernst and Young. So now it's EY. But be the global director of personal financial services, which encompassed the personal practice amongst other things. One of the reasons I went to a big firm like the Big Eight, like Ernst and Ernst, was because it's like a big corporation too. There are so many different business opportunities within an organization of that size. A law background is so valuable in so many ways. And I went to that organization because I thought I'd have the opportunity to observe and possibly do a lot of other things, which it proved true for me. And I'm very grateful to the Ernst firm to EY for all of the opportunities I got while I was there. But it all started with that undergraduate professor and then with Leon Gabinet at Case Western Reserve, which I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. And maybe I'll finish with this. It was quite a surprise for me when I got the call that I was being admitted into the society. And it's one of the highlights of my professional career because it was so unsuspected. It was just so unexpected. Here I'm not really, I mean, tax lawyers are tax lawyers too. We had lots on both sides of the accounting side and the tax side, but here to be admitted to this, there's so many wonderful people that have been, I feel very honored to be admitted into the society. I've always been focused on giving back. And so I established scholarships at funds at both Case Western Reserve Law School and my undergraduate school to focus on first generation college students. In law school, I let the deans decide where the money should go and where they think it's needed. But I would encourage alumni to think about the role that the law school played in their life and their career, and to consider paying it back. Because we all, I mean, for me, I'm very proud that I went to Case Western Reserve Law School. And I think we want to keep that alive. But that takes funding. It takes good people. It's going to take us going out and trying to, if we have family members, younger people in our families or acquaintances that are thinking about possibly going to law school, we should be encouraging them to go to Case Western Reserve. But I would lean back on your life's experiences and the role that the university played in your development and your future and your success, and take it to students that way, and also to think about giving back from a monetary perspective.